My mother-in-law burst into the delivery room like a storm. She pointed at my newborn baby and shouted, "That baby's last name will be mine, not yours." I laughed, thinking she was joking, but then the nurse leaned over and whispered, "She already tried to change it in the system." My husband's next words made her scream. I always knew my mother-in-law, Sylvia, was controlling, but I had no idea how far she would go until the day I gave birth to my first child. Let me explain. I married Daniel 3 years ago. From the start, Sylvia made it clear she didn't like me. She wasn't openly rude, but she had a way of making me feel like I didn't belong. She'd forget to invite me to family events, give me backhanded compliments, or bring up Daniel's ex as if I were just a temporary fling. But when I got pregnant, things got worse, much worse. Sylvia became obsessed with the baby. It was like she thought this was her second chance at being a mom. She started showing up unannounced, criticizing what I ate, questioning my doctor's decisions, and insisting the baby should have her last name, not mine or even Daniel's. Her reasoning? Our family name is more important. My son doesn't know what's best. You'll divorce eventually, but the baby will always be part of my family. Daniel and I shut her down. We told her the baby would have his last name, and that was final. She pretended to accept it, but I should have known she was just waiting for the right moment to strike. Then came the delivery. I was in labor for hours. The pain was unbearable, and I was exhausted. All I cared about was bringing my baby into the world safely. Finally, after pushing for what felt like forever, I heard my baby's first cry. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. They placed my daughter on my chest, and I cried. Daniel cried too. For a moment, everything was perfect. And then, the door flew open. Sylvia stormed in like she owned the place. No knock, no warning, just pure entitlement. She marched straight to my bed, ignoring the nurses, and pointed at my newborn. "That baby's last name will be mine, not yours," she yelled, loud enough for everyone to hear. I was so out of it from the delivery and the medication that I laughed. I thought she was joking, but the nurse beside me whispered, "She already tried to change it in the system." My heart stopped. "What?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The nurse looked at me with pity. "She went to the front desk before you gave birth and tried to put her last name on the birth certificate. We flagged it as suspicious and told the doctor." I felt sick. My hands shook as I held my baby tighter. This woman, my own mother-in-law, had tried to steal my child's name before she was even born. Daniel, who had been frozen in shock, suddenly snapped. "Get out," he said, his voice sharp and cold. Sylvia turned to him, pretending to be innocent. "Excuse me?" I said. "Get out," Daniel repeated, stepping between her and our baby. "You tried to change her name behind our backs. You don't belong here." The nurses stepped in, telling Sylvia to leave or they'd call security. That's when she lost it. She started screaming, full-on screaming, about how I was ruining the family, stealing her grandchild, and how I was just a placeholder in Daniel's life. Daniel didn't flinch. He looked at her with a coldness I'd never seen before and said, "Congratulations, Mom, you'll never see her again." Sylvia screamed even louder. She tried to lunge at me, but a nurse blocked her. Security rushed in and dragged her out, but she wasn't done. As they pulled her away, she kept shrieking, "I'll fix this. You'll regret this." Little did she know, we weren't done either. This was just the beginning. Sylvia's screams echoed down the hallway as security took her away. I sat there, holding my baby, shaking with rage. Daniel turned to me, his jaw clenched. "I swear, she'll never do this again." I nodded, too tired to speak, but I knew this wasn't over. The hospital staff assured us Sylvia wouldn't be allowed back. A nurse even flagged her as a risk in my file. We thought we were safe, but less than 12 hours later, while I was resting, Daniel stepped out to get food, and a nurse came in, looking uneasy. "There's a woman at the front desk," she said. "She's demanding to see the baby. She says she's the grandmother and has legal rights." I sat up so fast I almost pulled out my four. "Are you serious?" I whispered. The nurse nodded. "We're not letting her in. Security told her to leave, but she's refusing." My stomach churned. The audacity of this woman. She tried to steal my baby's name, and now she was trying to force her way back in. Before I could say anything, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "She just called me. She's threatening to get a lawyer." My heart sank. A lawyer? For what? She had no rights to my child, but Sylvia was unhinged, and I knew she wasn't bluffing. "Make sure she doesn't get near us," I told the nurse. "We will," she promised. "Security's already on it." But Sylvia didn't leave. She waited, and when we finally took our baby home, she made her next move. The first few days at home were exhausting. Sleepless nights, constant feedings, and the stress of being new parents left us drained. I thought Sylvia might back off for a while. I was wrong. On the third night, around 2 a.m., we heard a loud banging on the door. Not a knock, a pounding, like someone was trying to break in. My heart raced. Daniel grabbed his phone and checked the security camera. It was Sylvia, and she wasn't alone. She had brought her sister and brother-in-law. They stood behind her, arms crossed, looking furious. Sylvia held up a piece of paper and waved it at the camera. "I have a lawyer. You can't keep me away from my grandchild." Daniel cursed. "She's insane." "I called the police," Sylvia kept screaming. "You're stealing my granddaughter. I'll take you to court. This isn't over." It felt like forever before the police arrived. They told her to leave. She refused. They told her again. She screamed. Finally, they arrested her. I watched from the window as they put her in the squad car. Her sister and brother-in-law left quickly, pretending they had nothing to do with it. But I knew this wasn't the end. If Sylvia was willing to get arrested, she was capable of anything. A few days later, a letter arrived. It was from Sylvia's lawyer. She was suing for grandparents' rights. My hands shook as I read it. "She can't do this," I whispered. Daniel was furious. "She's out of her mind." In some states, grandparents can sue for visitation if they think they have a strong bond with the child, but our baby was a newborn. Sylvia had no case, right? Then I read the next part. Sylvia wasn't just asking for visits. She was claiming Daniel was mentally unfit to be a father. If the court believed her, she could try to take full custody. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just a fight anymore. This was war. I opened the door to find two strangers standing there. One of them, a woman, spoke calmly. "We're here to follow up on a report of neglect and unfit parenting." Her voice was steady, but her eyes scanned everything: our house, our faces, the baby sleeping in her bassinet nearby. My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Come in," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel looked like he was about to explode, but he stepped aside, letting them in. The questions started immediately. "Have you ever left the baby alone? Are there drugs or alcohol in the house? Does the father have a history of mental illness or violence?" My stomach dropped. Sylvia had done this. She was trying to make Daniel look unstable. The woman flipped through her notes. "We got an anonymous report saying the father has violent outbursts and that the baby might be in danger." I felt sick. "That's a lie," I said quickly. "Daniel is a great father." She gave me a polite smile, but her eyes were cold. "We're just doing our job." It was humiliating. They checked our fridge, looked at the baby's crib, even watched how we acted. After an hour, they finally left, but not before saying, "We'll be in touch." Daniel sat down, his face in his hands. "She's trying to take our baby away." I couldn't speak. How far would Sylvia go? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. We thought the CPS visit was bad. Then Daniel's lawyer called. "You need to come to my office, now." We rushed over, my heart pounding the whole way. When we walked in, his lawyer looked grim. "I just got something from Sylvia's legal team." He slid a folder across the desk. Daniel opened it, and his face turned white. Inside were screenshots of fake text messages that made it look like Daniel was telling a friend he couldn't handle being a dad, that he was losing control, even that he thought about hurting himself and the baby. It was all fake, completely made up. Daniel's hands shook as he held the papers. "This isn't me. This never happened." His lawyer nodded. "I know, but she's using this to say you're unstable. If the judge believes her, she could get visits, or even partial custody." I felt rage boiling inside me. This wasn't just a fight anymore. This was war. Then Daniel said something that changed everything. "If she faked these texts, what else has she faked?" We didn't know, but we were about to find out. That night, Daniel checked his credit report, just to be safe. What he found made my blood run cold. There was a credit card in his name that he never opened. Charges were made. 200 here, 500 there, and they all led to payments to a private investigator. "She's been spying on us," I said, my voice shaking. We dug deeper. Sylvia hadn't just been watching us, she'd taken out a loan in Daniel's name. She was trying to make him look financially unstable. Daniel clenched his fists. "I'm done, we're going nuclear." That night, we hired a forensic investigator. Sylvia had no idea what was coming. 2 weeks later, the investigator called. "I found something you need to see." We met him at his office. He pulled up an email on his computer. It was from Sylvia to her lawyer. In it, she wrote, "If we can make him look unstable, I can win. The texts are already set up. Just need to make sure CPS believes it." She had admitted it, in writing. I felt dizzy. This was it. This was the proof we needed. Daniel's lawyer smiled for the first time. "This is fraud. This is perjury. This will destroy her case." I finally breathed. "So we can stop her?" His smile widened. "Oh, we're not just stopping her, we're burying her." We had everything: the email, the fake texts, the bank fraud, the private investigator. Sylvia's lies were about to come crashing down. The day of the hearing came fast. I was a nervous wreck, but Daniel was calm, too calm. He walked into that courtroom like a man ready to end this. Sylvia, on the other hand, strutted in like she'd already won. She wore an expensive suit, her hair perfect, her chin high. When she saw us, she smirked. That smug look made my blood boil. She thought she had us beat. She had no idea what was coming. Sylvia's lawyer started strong. Your Honor, my client is only looking out for her grandchild. She has serious concerns about the father's mental stability and financial issues. We have evidence to support this. Daniel's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, that evidence is fake. Sylvia's smirk faded. The judge raised an eyebrow. Explain. Our lawyer did. First, he showed how the text messages were fake, created with an app. The timestamps didn't match. The metadata was wrong. Sylvia's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Then came the bank fraud. The judge's face darkened as he saw the unauthorized credit card and loan in Daniel's name. Finally, our lawyer handed over the email. He read it aloud. If we can make him look unstable, I can win. The texts are already set up. Just need to make sure CPS believes it. The courtroom went silent. Sylvia turned pale. Her lawyer started flipping through his papers, looking for a way out. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Holloway, do you have an explanation for this? Sylvia stammered. I was just trying to protect my grandchild. The judge cut her off. By lying? By committing fraud? By manipulating the system? Her face turned red. I was only doing what any grandmother would do. Daniel scoffed. A good grandmother wouldn't try to ruin her son's life. Sylvia spun toward him, her eyes blazing. You're a fool. She's taken you from your family. She's poisoned you against me. I was protecting you. Daniel's voice was cold. You don't get to decide what's best for my child. Sylvia trembled. Her whole case had fallen apart. The judge spoke. This case is dismissed. The petition for grandparents' rights is denied. Furthermore, he turned to Sylvia. Mr. and Mrs. Holloway have grounds to press charges for fraud, identity theft, and perjury. Sylvia gasped. No, you can't do this to me. The judge wasn't done. I'm also issuing a restraining order. You will not contact them or come near their child. If you do, you will be arrested. Sylvia broke down. She turned to Daniel, tears streaming down her face. Danny, you wouldn't do this to your own mother. Daniel didn't flinch. You did this to yourself. She whispered. You'll regret this, and stormed out. I wish I could say that was the end, but Sylvia didn't give up. She called from blocked numbers, sent letters, even tried fake social media accounts, but the restraining order held, and the fraud case moved forward. Daniel and I pressed charges. We didn't want to, but after everything she'd done, we had to make sure she'd never try this again. In the end, Sylvia was found guilty of identity theft, fraud, and filing a false CPS report. She got 1 year in prison and 5 years of probation. When the verdict was read, she didn't fight. She just sat there, silent, as her world fell apart. It's been a year now. Our daughter is happy and healthy. Daniel and I are stronger than ever. Sylvia? We haven't heard from her. Part of me wonders if she'll ever change, if she'll ever see how much she destroyed, but I'm not holding my breath. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: some people don't belong in your life, no matter how much they say they love you, and I'll never let someone like that control me again. She's gone, and we're finally free.